Hey guys, welcome back. What you're looking at right here is obviously some ties I have glued down already. These have been glued and set for a few days now. I'm just coming back in right now and giving everything a light sanding to even up the surface of our ties before we begin staining and then subsequently putting down our rail and spiking everything into place. What I like to do is take a short straight edge like this. You could use something longer, of course, but I found that sometimes using a longer one, it'll tend to kind of ride up over the surface of these ties. You won't always get an accurate kind of gauge as to how even or uneven the surface is. In here I am on a slight increase in my grade. I'm kind of going uphill in this direction, ever so slightly, maybe a 0.5%, if that even. I've already completed this far track back here. Okay, we got all this all sanded down and ready to go. There is going to be a curb turnout back here, curb switch back in this area here. So we're going to be working on this diverging route over here. It's going to be where the main splits into two. So what I'd like to do is just take my straight edge, and this is just a simple triangle square, and I will just set it on the surface, and I will run it along. And about every length of the tool, I should say, okay, for every length of the tool, what I like to do is to just try to rock it a little bit and see, can I rock it? Because if I can, then I'm sitting on a high spot, which needs to be knocked down a little bit. So if you kind of ever get a little bit of this, I'm exaggerating it here, but if you ever get a little bit of rock to it, you know that's a high spot. So I like to come along. Like right here, ever so slightly, I'm getting a bit of a high spot. Not much, but slightly, right in this area here. For the moment, I'm going to continue along, and I'm pushing this down against the surface of the ties. So obviously, if the front edge of this catches a tie, I know there's a high spot there I need to sand. So I'll just bring this along like this. Again, seeing if I can rock it at all. Right here, in this tie here, I'm getting a bit of a spot. It's just ever so slightly, but it is hitting it. If I put my triangle on that tie, with that tie in the center, I'm able to rock it. Can you hear that and see that? That would cause an uneven spot in our track work, okay, which obviously we want to avoid. You want your track to be as smooth and flowing as you can make it. You know, it's going to help increase, obviously, operational reliability, and, you know, won't have you chasing derailments all the time. So I'm just going to continue on a little bit, out of the camera view here. Getting a couple more little spots. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come back, and what I do like to do is give the entire area a light sanding with a sander, but on those high spot areas, I'll let it rest there just a half second or a second longer in order to knock down that high spot. All I'm using here today is I'm using an orbital sander. Some guys don't prefer the orbital. Some of them just like the square ones that just oscillate back and forth. I've had good luck with this. The big key with it, using an orbital, don't apply a ton of downward pressure. Okay, let the sandpaper do the work. What I've got on here today is an 80 grit. Okay, works just fine. Able to knock down this soft sugar pine very quickly. So again, I'll just come back, refresh my memory a little as to where my high spot was. So I know to spend an extra moment or two there. Okay. There's the one. I've got a little screw on the surface here I could use for a visual aid, so, okay. So again, I just like to turn on the sander, and again, let just the weight of the sander, just apply enough pressure to control the sander, because it will want to dance around on you, okay? So you got to just apply some light pressure, and I like to start this and get it up to speed, and then bring it down to the ties, okay? You don't want to start it on the ties, because it could jerk around a bit, pop up, you know, more of your ties on you. So I'm going to turn this on. It's going to be loud for a few moments, but I'm going to give everything a quick sand, and I'll switch it down, and we'll continue talking. Okay, so we've got that done. That little bit of noise is over with. So I'll just come back in now. Take a look at my ties. Again, I hit those with an 80. You could use a 120 grit even. You know, you don't have to use 80. 80 is pretty aggressive. But I like it because when I move it around rapidly like that, besides it sanding it down, it also tends to put a little bit of a texture, a little bit of a rough surface onto these ties, which is just excellent when you go ahead and stain it because it'll give it that bit of a distressed, you know, look, kind of bit of age to it. But there we go, and yeah, everything's looking pretty good. Pretty happy with it. Okay, good. The surface knocked down, everything's nice and even now. And the next segment of the video, I'm going to be starting my coloring process on this section of ties that we have down. I'm going to be following the same steps that I used in an earlier video, which consisted of an initial coat of a gray colored stain from Minwax. I use that as a base coat. It goes on very dark, but when it dries, it lightens up a lot. And then I come back and I use a mixture, of all things, of some Woodland Scenics pigment, mixed with a little bit of an ebony colored stain, or a black colored stain. And it creates a nice dark, grimy, muddy brown color, which I will then top coat those ties. Obviously, of course, allowing the first coat of the gray stain to come to, you know, complete dry. You know, you want it to dry completely and that sort of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and get set up for that, and then we'll come back in and I'll show you how I'm going to begin the staining process. Alright guys, we're back. What I have in front of me here is a can of Minwax stain. This is their classic gray, which is just what it implies. I don't know if you can see that too well there. It's just a gray stain. I like it because, as I covered in the earlier videos I did a while back, you apply the gray stain first, and then you come back over it with the Woodland Scenics pigment and ebony stain mixture that I'm going to do afterwards. It creates a really nice effect. The gray in certain areas kind of bleeds through just ever so slightly, and the only thing I can articulate it with would be if you go look at some older railroad ties along the tracks by your place, you'll notice the top edge of the wood grain, you know, the rough edges of the tie, if you will, those start to bleach out first and take on a lighter grayish colored appearance. And that's kind of what it leaves you with once that second coat, the brown color, once that dries completely. It's really a unique appearance. The first videos I did on this, the lighting wasn't the best, but I'm going to go ahead and redo some of those videos here for you guys now. I'm going to tighten in just a little bit on a small little section of ties. Now, the thing with this is, you don't need to be bashful with this stuff. I'm just using a cheap paintbrush rather, from Home Depot, actually. Just a little 99-cent special. Just something to sling it on with, okay? That's all we're looking for. So, go ahead and just actually widen back out slightly on this. Just get your brush in there, load it up with the stuff. Obviously stain, very runny, very thin. Don't worry about it. We're just going to go ahead and we're going to start slopping it on. It's, again, a gray color. And after I do a little bit of this, I'll take the camera off and bring it in closer for you so you guys can get a better look. Obviously, make sure you get your sides of your ties, in between your ties on both sides, as well as the opposite side as well. Because you don't want to miss, you don't want to have any areas missed. And again, don't be bashful with it. You don't need to stretch this stuff too far. you know. I'll load my brush up and do maybe 6, 7, 8 ties, and then I'll go back to the can and reload it with some more. Now, what I like about this gray color is it just seems to be an excellent way to begin the coloring process. Let me get this can out of the way here. I don't even know really how to describe it. The first time I had done this, like I said in my previous videos, it was just kind of an experiment, you know. I thought, man, I'm going to try this and see what happens. Because I figured, what's it going to hurt? If it looks like garbage, well, I'll rip up the few ties and start over, you know. And thankfully, it came out looking, at least to my eyes, really close to what I was after. So it seems kind of, I don't know, maybe kind of going, pardon the pun, against the grain here a little bit to start coloring your railroad ties gray. You start thinking, I want them brown. What are you doing, you know? And what I found, like I said, is when we go ahead and go over it with that top coat, if you go back and check some of my previous videos, the final result's fantastic. And the one thing you might notice is you might look at them initially in certain lighting in those videos and think, well, it's a little dark, you know. But the one thing I didn't show in those videos, and I wish I had, was when I came back later and I spread the ballast out. I came back in, ballasted a section, you know, put down some wet water, glue, you know, and then some glue, allowed it to dry. And then I came back in with some of the dust that you'd find in the bottom of some of the containers. You know, I actually got some just fine dirt and gravels from a dirt road close to my house here, sifted them out, that kind of thing. And I went back over it with just a light coating of dust once that glue had dried. Spread it around with a brush. And that dust took that dark color, put a little bit of it lightened it up a little bit. But you were able to kind of look through the dust and still see the look and appearance of creosoted ties under it, if that makes sense. So I was pretty happy with it. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick the camera up here, take off the tripod here, and take you a little closer to see what I got going on here. Pardon me shaking you around like that. So, again, just a nice coating, gray stain. I'm going to go ahead and obviously continue this all the way around, all the stuff I've got glued down over there, heading all the way over to the far side there. But here it is. And like I said, this is the first step. We're going to let this dry. I definitely like to let it dry overnight before I begin the second portion, which is, again, like I said, using the pigment and stuff. So we're going to continue on with this. You know, again, when this dries, it will dry a bit lighter than it is now. I'd say maybe 30-40% lighter than what it is right now. And the ties really seem to soak it in pretty well. So like I said, it works wonderful as a base color. And really when you're not stopping and, you know, trying to film this stuff like I am now, obviously, it goes really quick, the staining and stuff. So, but I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to continue on with that. And then I'll show you the finished product here once I get all the way around with what I've got glued down so far tie-wise. So stay tuned. Hey guys, just thought I'd bring you back in and let you watch a little bit more of the staining process, which, while not very difficult, is just it's definitely an important step. I just wanted to take a few minutes and talk about, you know, why I'm doing this and why some of you might want to do that too. Those of you that have watched a lot of my other videos pertaining to the 2-rail side of things, know that I'm really interested in the details. It's all about the detail for me. Excuse me. Like I said earlier in the earlier segment, this gray color is the first step in a multi-step process, but the process, once it's completed, gives what I think is a very, very fair representation of what mainline trackage and ties and stuff are going to look like and looked like back in the 40s and 50s during the era I'm modeling. So, but again, this is what suits my eye. This is just the method I'm using. My advice to any of you would be to go ahead and, you know, take a few ties, experiment with the colors, you know, try some thinned out paints or washes. A lot of guys like to use inks thinned with alcohol. Various stains, combinations of stains. It all depends on what's the look you're going after, what's the what's the track you're modeling? Is it modern day mainline trackage? Is it, is it branch lines? Is it old industry leads? So that, you got to take all that into account when you're trying to decide, gee, how do I want to color these things? How do I want to stain them? What do I want them to look like? So many variables, and all of them are okay. Sometimes it comes down to some folks, they just don't like working with stain, or they don't like working with paint. So again, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever feels right to you, feels good, that you're happy with using, go ahead and use that. Do, again, what suits you, what you like, but don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to try different things and different combinations and styles and techniques. There's so many to choose from. There's so many options. This, again, was something I stumbled on this. I slapped down the gray on the ties, and I went, well, that's interesting, but I don't want them all to look old and ancient. And then like I said, I tried that Woodland Scenics pigment. It was brown, it was okay, but I'm like, there's something missing. So I tried adding some of that ebony stain, black colored stain. And just a few drops, probably 10 parts, pigment to 1 part ebony stain. And it was just that subtle little difference. It just darkened it up just a hair, that once applied to this and once it dried overnight, it was spot on to my eyes and to what I was modeling and stuff. So, again, don't be afraid to play with it and to try different options. This, like I said, is just what really works for me. And it's just easy. You just slap this stuff on. Of course, you don't want to spray it all over the place. So take a little bit of care, of course, when you're doing this. But it just works so well that when I'm done, I really enjoy the final look. So, again, that said, try what works out well for you. Try what looks good to your eyes. And again, don't be afraid to experiment. Okay? This video here, like I said, primarily was just covering a quick little segment of sanding down the ties and me beginning the first part of the process here. So again, just to recap, I'm just putting down some classic gray stain from Minwax. I'm putting it on with a cheap 90 cent brush, brushing it on. We're going to let it dry overnight. And the next video will contain me mixing up that mixture I was telling you about with the Woodland Scenics pigment with some ebony stain. And I'll be applying that over the top of this. So I'll be taking you through how I mix that up, and applying it, and then what it looks like while it's going on. And then we'll come back later, of course, after it's had a chance to dry, and we'll take a look at that as well. But for this video, that's going to conclude this. I think it's long enough by now. I tend to be a bit long-winded. I apologize for that. But again, try some of this stuff. Don't be afraid to try it. Like I said, hand-laid track is some of the best track you'll ever see in your life. Reason being is because you made it with your own 2 hands. So, have fun with it. Play around with it. Don't be afraid to give it a try, Even if you just do a small area on your layout, Maybe you want to lay down some microengineering everywhere in the layout, and you got this one industry lead or something that's, 4 or 5 feet long, Give it a try. Dabble with it a little bit. It's fun, it's relaxing, and you sure can't beat the look when it's finished. So, thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for the next video.